I'm Madeline Carter, and this past Christmas, while my family was clinking champagne glasses on a private yacht, I was sitting alone in my Portland apartment, watching the lights on a 3-foot thrift store tree blink quietly in the dark. No invitation, no phone call, just an email. A $3,000 invoice for a celebration I didn't even know had happened. They didn't save me a seat, but they carved out a share of the cost. And somehow, that said everything. If you've ever been the one who held everyone else together, only to realize no one was holding you, this story is for you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's the first step toward being seen. I sat on the edge of my couch, wrapped in an old fleece blanket that still faintly smelled like cinnamon. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Outside my window, Portland was blanketed in soft winter rain, the kind that blurred streetlights and made everything feel further away. Inside, the only light came from a string of blinking dollar store lights I'd draped over a 3-foot pine tree I'd dragged up the stairs myself. It leaned slightly to the left, decorated with a patchwork of mismatched thrift store ornaments. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And tonight, it was the only thing glowing in the dark. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor was playing a clumsy version of Silent Night on an old piano. From another unit came the muffled sound of laughter, glasses clinking, someone shouting "Merry Christmas" through a cracked open door. I tried to smile, pretend it didn't sting. But it did. It always did. This was the third Christmas in a row with no text, no call, not even a sarcastic card from my family. The first year, they blamed a mix-up. The second, they said they assumed I'd be busy and didn't want to pressure me. This year, they didn't bother with an excuse at all. Just silence. Until my phone buzzed. For a split second, I let myself believe it was different. Maybe someone remembered. Maybe, just maybe, this year they'd thought of me. I picked up the phone, my breath catching just a little. The subject line read, "Shared family holiday, costs, breakdown attached." I blinked, tapped it open. At the top of the PDF, bolded in neat Calibri font, were the words, "Holiday Yacht Party, Family Expenses Summary, Total $6 $100, Split 3 ways, My share $3,000. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to shift into a joke, a winking emoji, a sarcastic, "Just kidding." But there was nothing. Just a bullet point list: catering, dock fees, open bar. At the bottom, a line I couldn't stop reading. Please transfer payment to Gregory Carter's account by January 5th. My father, the yacht party, apparently, had already happened. A celebration for Logan's new promotion. Regional manager at some property firm, I think. I hadn't even known about it. No text, no call, not a whisper. But they remembered me when it was time to pay. I put the phone down slowly and looked back at my little tree. The lights blinked, warm and steady, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I used to love Christmas. I used to bake cookies with Mom, argue with Logan about which movie to watch. He always wanted action. I wanted something sappy. Dad would pretend to complain as he untangled the lights, but he always smiled when he thought no one was looking. We were messy, loud, but we were together. Now they had a yacht, and I had a bill. Not even a greeting. Just an invoice. Like I was some distant cousin expected to contribute but not attend. Like, my only role was financial. The lights kept blinking on that tree, but all I could see was a number. $3,000. For a party I didn't know about. For a brother who hadn't even texted. And somehow, that said everything. I kept staring at the blinking lights, but my mind was already somewhere else. Somewhere quieter, warmer. Somewhere before the invoices and the silence. I could still smell the sugar cookies Mom used to bake, the ones she shaped like stars and dusted with cinnamon. Sharon Carter wasn't a perfect mother, but every December, she came alive in the kitchen. Her apron was always dusted with flour, her Christmas playlist stuck on repeat. She'd hum while rolling out dough. And even though she always claimed baking was therapeutic, she'd swat Logan with a spatula when he tried to steal cookies too early. He'd laugh. She'd pretend to scold. I'd watch it all and try to make my own tray, measuring every edge, hoping they'd turn out just as golden. We'd argue about movies afterwards. Logan always wanted explosions. I wanted something sappy. The Holiday, or It's a Wonderful Life. He called them sleep movies. I called his choices loud nonsense. We never agreed, so Dad would usually pick something no one wanted just to end the fight. Gregory Carter had a knack for acting put upon, but I'd catch him chuckling behind his mug of hot cocoa every time we settled in, shoulder to shoulder on the couch, the scent of pine and sugar still hanging in the air. It wasn't always perfect, but it was ours. Now, they had a yacht, and I had a charge. The image of them clinking glasses on a sleek deck, laughing under string lights while someone poured champagne. It wasn't hard to picture. I could even hear Sharon's voice. To Logan, our rising star. She would have worn that red cashmere shawl she saved for special occasions. Gregory would have one arm slung around Logan, the other holding a glass, nodding like he had seen this coming all along. Logan would look sheepish and proud, like he was still playing the part of someone figuring it all out. Maybe someone made a toast, maybe they took photos, maybe they posted them somewhere I couldn't see. But I wasn't there. Not even in name, not in a seat, not in a group chat, only in the spreadsheet. It wasn't the party that broke me. It was the remembering. How many Decembers I'd spent helping make those memories for other people. How many little roles I'd played to keep the season together. I used to label cookie tins for neighbors. I handwrote every gift tag. I made sure everyone's favorite hot chocolate mix was stocked. I kept the peace during gift exchanges when tension ran high. I wrapped Logan's presents when he forgot. I bought last-minute batteries when no one else thought to. And every year, I went to bed feeling like maybe, just maybe, I mattered. But I didn't get an invite to the party. I didn't even get a heads up. I got a balance due. That was the part that lingered. Not the absence, not even the exclusion, but the message underneath it all, that my presence didn't matter, only my contribution. I wasn't thought of when the guest list was made, or when the boat was booked, or when the glasses were raised. I was only remembered when the receipts came in. I leaned back against the couch and let that truth settle in my chest like cold air. This was the gap no one talked about. The quiet space between who I'd been to them and who they were willing to be for me. There had been no breach, no falling out, just a slow, deliberate drift away. Not with a storm, but with silence. They didn't forget me. They erased me. And maybe the worst part was how long I'd let them. I used to think being called independent was something to be proud of, a strength, a quiet superpower. When I was 12 and packed my own lunch every morning without being asked, Gregory would smile, ruffle my hair, and say to anyone who'd listen, "That one's built different. Madeline handles herself." At family cookouts, at holiday dinners, he'd repeat it like a badge he pinned on me. "She's always been the independent one." And I'd smile. I thought it meant I was seen, that he noticed I didn't ask for much. That maybe, in some small way, he respected me more for not needing what Logan always seemed to require in bulk: attention, patience, and cleanup crews. But over time, the tone changed. The pride faded. The sentence stayed. But the warmth slipped out of it. Madeline's independent became shorthand for, "She doesn't need an invite. She won't mind if we don't call. She's probably busy." It was no longer a compliment. It was a permission slip, a justification, a quiet door closing in slow motion. It meant I wouldn't make a scene if I was left out, that I'd understand, that I'd be fine, And for a long time, I was, or I convinced myself I was. I picked up the slack. I remembered the things no one else did. I paid the forgotten bills, answered the late night calls, sent flowers when someone else forgot a birthday. I stepped into cracks so no one would have to feel the discomfort of them widening. I told myself that was love. That's what strong daughters do. But here's what no one tells you about being strong in a family that's gotten used to you playing that role eventually. They stop checking if you're okay. They stop noticing if you're tired. They assume silence means capacity. That showing up means you're happy to. Doing it all means you never needed help in the first place. It's a beautiful trap. And it works. Until one day, it doesn't. Sitting there on my couch, staring at that $3,000 invoice, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. They weren't punishing me. They weren't even angry. They'd just stopped seeing me as someone who needed to be seen. I wasn't on the list because I was never expected to need inclusion. I was the helper, the reliable one, the one who could miss the party and still send a gift, still follow up, still wire money. Logan forgot birthdays and still got applause. I remembered everyone's coffee order and didn't even get a seat. That was the cost of being the independent one. They didn't need to hurt me on purpose. They just needed me to keep functioning. And that realization, it didn't come with rage. It came with a soft, hollow ache, like finding out the thing you thought was a window was actually a wall all along. They never checked if I was fine, because they needed me to be, and I let them. Logan had always been the golden one, the one who could stumble into a room late and still be met with warmth. He wasn't malicious, just effortlessly central. Gravity seemed to bend around him, even when he didn't mean it to. When we were kids, he'd forget his science project until the night before, and somehow, Sharon would still drive him to the store at 9 p.m. to grab poster board and glitter. I, on the other hand, would stay up 2 nights making a model of the solar system, only to get a nod and a, "You always get it done." Madeline. Praise without presence. So when Logan called me 3 months ago, nervous and unsure, I didn't hesitate. He'd applied for a promotion, regional manager, property group, lots of travel perks, and he didn't think he'd get it. His voice cracked a little when he said, "I don't think I'm qualified." The resume he sent was a mess. 2 pages of typos, rambling bullet points, inconsistent formatting. I opened it on a Thursday night and stared at the screen, thinking, he doesn't need a resume. He needs a rescue. So I stayed up. I rewrote entire sections, cut the fluff, polished the layout, and cleaned up every careless sentence. I crafted a new cover letter from scratch. I even walked him through mock interviews, twice, pretending not to notice how much he leaned on me. I told myself it was just a sibling thing. That one day, he'd return the favor. He got the job. 2 weeks later, they threw him a yacht party. I didn't get a thank you. Not a text, not a shout out, not even a quiet message saying, "I couldn't have done it without you." What I got, instead, was a PDF attachment and a polite request to send $3,000. That was the part that made me pause, not because I expected fanfare, but because the silence was so complete. They had remembered me when it was time to split the bill. Not when Logan stood on the deck holding champagne, not when they booked the boat or sent out invites, just when the caterer needed to be paid. It was a coronation, a celebration of his arrival. But the crown they placed on his head, I'd built it, not for glory, not for credit, just because I thought that's what families did. You show up, you help, you lift. But lifting without recognition eventually turns into being stepped over. And when you're invisible long enough, you start to wonder if you ever really existed to them as more than a function. They called me the independent one, but what they really meant was disposable, reliable, invisible, expected. And I had fulfilled every expectation. Until now. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger is loud. And what I felt was quiet. Too quiet. It hummed beneath my skin like a current. Something low and steady. Impossible to ignore. I lay on the couch long after the lights on the tree had blinked themselves into stillness. The phone still resting on the coffee table where I'd left it. Open. Waiting. That invoice had said more than any holiday card ever could. Not invited, not mentioned, not missed. Just calculated. Every time I closed my eyes, the number flashed behind my eyelids, $3,000. For a party I didn't know about. A celebration I had helped make possible without even realizing it. My name wasn't on this guest list, but it was on the invoice. And suddenly, I was tired. Not just of the oversight, but of the pattern, of giving quietly while they took noisily, of being the scaffolding to their celebration, only to be forgotten once the structure was standing. I sat up, pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, and reached for my phone. I opened the banking app without hesitation. My fingers moved like they already knew what to do. Gregory's account number was saved under Dad, as if that label still carried warmth. I typed in the amount $1. Then, in the memo line, I wrote, "Santa skipped me, too." No explanation, no sarcasm, just that. It wasn't a jab. It wasn't even a cry for attention. It was the kind of message you laugh at, if you don't stop to really think about it. The kind that unsettles you just enough to make you wonder if there's something you missed. And that was exactly the point. For years, I had tried to soften the truth. I edited myself down to the version of me they were most comfortable with, capable, quiet, out of the way. But this single dollar, this 6-word note, was the most honest thing I'd ever sent my father. I hit send. The screen flashed transfer complete. And for the first time in what felt like a very long time, something inside me shifted. Not relief, not revenge, just clarity. Like I had finally said something I'd been swallowing for years, without pleading, without asking to be understood. Just said it, plain and clear. I set the phone down, stood up, and walked slowly toward the kitchen table. The apartment was still, no music, no laughter, no family noise. But I didn't feel alone. I felt awake. Because sometimes the quietest gesture says the loudest thing. And sometimes $1 is all it takes to make someone realize exactly how much they've taken. I didn't go back to sleep. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. Something in me had turned, gently, finally. Like a door I hadn't realized was locked had creaked open just wide enough to let me step through. The $1 had been a beginning, a line drawn in quiet ink. But now came the rest. I sat at my kitchen table, still in my blanket, still surrounded by the hum of blinking lights from the tree in the corner. I opened my laptop, logged in. Netflix was first. The account was mine. Had been for years. I'd added everyone gradually. It started with a simple, "Can I use yours for a bit?" and became permanent. Sharon had her profile. Gregory had his. Logan, of course, had one labeled boss mode. I hovered over each name, then clicked remove user, one by one. No hesitation. Then change password. Log out on all devices. Confirm. Spotify was next. Family plan. 5 users. Only one was paying. Then Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, HBO Max. All registered under my name, my email, and my credit card. I cleaned house. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel petty either. I felt clean. Like I was finally washing off a layer of invisible dust that had settled quietly across my life. The kind of dust that builds slowly until you forget it was never supposed to be there in the first place. The phone plan came next. I'd been covering most of it for nearly 4 years. At first, it made sense. Better bundle, easier billing. I was the one who handled that stuff. Gregory and Sharon would Venmo me, until they didn't. The last payment I received was nearly a year ago. I'd reminded them, gently, then less gently. Eventually, I just stopped. It was easier to carry it than to argue. But not anymore. I opened the mobile provider's portal and scrolled through the connected numbers. I knew which ones were theirs. I clicked each line, removed them, clicked again, confirmed. I stared at the screen after the last name disappeared. It felt light, not empty, just mine. And then, the credit cards. There were two, both in my name. Both were handed over to my parents for emergencies. Emergencies had evolved over time into groceries, gas, dinners, and little indulgences that somehow stopped being rare. I'd checked the statements for years, always telling myself I'd cancel them eventually. But something always stopped me. What if they needed it? What if it caused a fight? What if it made me look ungrateful? Now, those questions didn't hold weight. They sounded like fear dressed up as loyalty. I froze both accounts, requested new cards, new numbers. No one would touch my name again without my permission. When I finally closed my laptop, the clock read 12:42 a.m. Outside, the city slept. Inside, everything glowed the same, but felt entirely different, like the walls had shifted ever so slightly, like the air itself had more space in it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. Done being the backup plan, the built-in safety net, the silent subscription service with no expiration date. And that quiet act of reclaiming, line by line, login by login, wasn't about punishment. It was about remembering that I could. By morning, the messages had already started. The first came from Sharon, just after 7 a.m. Hey, is Netflix down? I keep getting an error. No greeting. No good morning. No Merry Christmas. No, how are you? Just a screen that wouldn't load. And a mother who noticed the inconvenience before she noticed the silence. 10 minutes later, one from Gregory. There might be an issue with the phone bill. Can you check mine saying no service? The phrasing was familiar, careful, detached, as if the line had been dropped by accident, not by choice, as if his number being removed was a glitch, not a consequence. Then Logan. Okay, what's going on? Amazon's locked. Spotify too. This is really immature. I read that one twice. Immature. The words settled in my chest like something bitter, as if what I'd done was a tantrum. As if drawing a boundary was childish, as if years of silent giving, quiet fixing, and invisible effort had just never happened. I didn't reply, not because I couldn't, but because there was nothing I could say that wouldn't be twisted into guilt, no way to explain without being accused of overreacting, no path forward that wouldn't lead straight back to the same spot I'd always stood in, the reasonable one, the one who bent so others wouldn't have to. I scrolled through the chat history, dozens of photos, jokes, and plans I'd never seen, group texts I hadn't been part of. Logan shares a video of the yacht party, Sharon commenting, "Such a perfect night." Gregory is adding a string of champagne emojis. They weren't hiding it. I just hadn't been invited to see it, because I wasn't part of it. I had become the utility, the autopay, the login that worked, the number that got the receipts. I was a button in the background of their lives, pressed only when something broke. And now that the system was offline, I wasn't missed. Just the access. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked how I'd spent Christmas Eve. No one wondered if I'd been alone, or if I needed anything. They were confused, yes, but not about me. About the perks. About the comfort I'd stopped quietly supplying. They didn't miss me. They missed what I gave them. I muted the thread, turned off notifications, set the phone down face down on the table, and in the silence that followed, something remarkable happened. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel regret. I felt peace. It wasn't about cutting them off. It was about unplugging the illusion they'd grown too comfortable living inside. And when the lights blinked softly from the tree across the room, I realized I hadn't dimmed anything. I had simply stopped being their electricity. It was the day after Christmas when the unknown number called. I almost didn't answer. I was halfway through making coffee, the apartment wrapped in a kind of stillness that felt earned. No music, no phone buzzing with demands, just the soft hum of the heater and the scent of cinnamon from an old candle I'd lit out of habit. But something about the number, area code 971 local, made me pause. I picked up. "Hi, this is Erica from Union Crest Credit Union's fraud department. Am I speaking with Madeline Carter?" I said yes. Steady. "We've received a report regarding potential unauthorized activity on 2 credit cards registered under your name. Do you have a few minutes to go over some account details?" I closed my eyes for a moment. Of course. She began listing the accounts. Both of them cards I'd frozen just a few nights earlier. The ones I'd opened years ago, back when emergency use sounded like a reasonable phrase. Back when I still thought being generous without boundaries was a kind of love. "There was a report of fraudulent access," Erica said. "The caller claimed they've been locked out of funds they were authorized to use." I exhaled slowly. "There's no fraud," I said, my voice calm. "I'm the account holder. No one else is on those cards. I froze them intentionally." A pause. I could hear her typing on the other end. "And the individuals who were using the cards previously, my parents," I said, "they were using them without my consent. I let it go for too long. That's over now." Silence stretched between us, the kind that used to make me rush to fill it, to soften it, to explain. But not this time. Erica finally replied, her tone professional but not cold. "Understood. Just to confirm, you're aware of all recent changes and transactions, and you authorize them. I do." I said, "There's no fraud here, just a family who mistook me for a resource." And then, without thinking, I added, "I've just stopped being the one who quietly held it all together." Another pause. Then, an unexpected chuckle from her end. Not mocking, just human. "Well," she said gently, "I'll go ahead and close the report, then, and I'll make a note on the file." "Thank you," I said, suddenly feeling the weight of those 2 words in a way I hadn't in a long time. "Take care of yourself, Ms. Carter," she added before hanging up. The line clicked. I stood there, phone still in hand, the dial tone fading, and all I could hear were my own words echoing back to me. "There's no fraud here. I just stopped being the one who held it all together." It wasn't a confession. It was a release. The kind that doesn't need a raised voice or a slammed door. The kind that doesn't ask for understanding. Only space. And peace. For the first time in years, I had told the truth. And I hadn't apologized for it. New Year's Eve arrived without fanfare. No plans. No invitations. Just a quiet sky above Portland, streaked with the kind of cold that lingered on windows but didn't quite reach the bone. For the first time in years, I didn't check my phone to see if anyone would remember me. I didn't open social media to watch the countdowns, the clinking glasses, the filtered kisses at midnight. I didn't wonder if they were thinking of me. I already knew the answer. Around 7, I put on a sweater I loved, deep green, soft, the kind that makes you feel like maybe the world doesn't get to touch you. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and stepped into the night. The streets downtown were alive in their own gentle way. Twinkle lights in cafe windows. Couples walking hand in hand. A violinist on a corner is playing something sweet and slow. I passed restaurants bustling with energy, voices rising in anticipation of midnight. But I wasn't looking for noise. I was looking for somewhere quiet enough to hear myself. I found a small place tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Nothing fancy, just warm lighting, wood tables, and the scent of rosemary and butter in the air. I asked for a table by the window. The waiter didn't blink at the fact that I was alone. He simply nodded and led me to a corner spot where I could see the city without feeling exposed to it. I ordered a glass of red wine, a ribeye, mashed potatoes with garlic and cream. It felt like a meal you'd save for something special. And maybe that was the point. Maybe reclaiming yourself doesn't always look like a grand speech or a courtroom victory. Sometimes it's steak. Sometimes it's choosing not to settle for takeout on the couch just because no one invited you anywhere else. I didn't scroll, didn't respond to notifications, didn't open the muted group chat I knew was buzzing with a flurry of photos I wouldn't be in. I just sat there, present, in my body, in my silence, in the small, unexpected comfort of doing something kind for myself, without needing anyone else to see it. The meal came hot and unhurried. I ate slowly, chewed with care. Let each bite remind me that I was allowed to enjoy something without asking permission. And when midnight came, the restaurant dimmed the lights just slightly. A soft cheer rippled through the room as people raised their glasses. Some kissed, some laughed, some cried. I didn't do any of those things. I lifted my glass, quietly, just me. No one toasted with me. No one needed to. Because this wasn't about a new year. It wasn't about resolutions or confetti or noise. It was about honoring something quieter, deeper. The version of me that had finally stopped begging to belong. For so long, I had accepted scraps, emotional leftovers, last-minute invitations if they remembered. I was always the one who understood, the one who bent, the one who paid for dinners I wasn't invited to and sent gifts to people who forgot my birthday. But not tonight. Tonight, I chose myself, not out of rebellion, not out of pride. Just because I was tired of waiting for people who only looked for me when they needed something, I paid the bill, left a generous tip, stepped outside into the cold, crisp air, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing anything, because I had finally shown up. For me. The email came during the second week of January. I almost deleted it without opening. The subject line was harmless enough. Hey, we should talk. But something in me, that small tug of curiosity you only feel for people who once had power over you, made me click. It was from Gregory. The message wasn't long, but it was precise. Every word seemed trimmed to avoid sharp edges. He didn't ask how I was, didn't mention Christmas, didn't reference the invoice, the yacht, or the phone calls that went unanswered. Instead, he offered a vague sentiment dressed up as wisdom. I know things have been tense lately. Maybe there were some misunderstandings. But at the end of this day, family sticks together. Even when things get hard, we shouldn't lose that. We can't forget what really matters. I read it twice, then a third time. There was no apology, no accountability, just nostalgia repackaged as moral high ground. It was the kind of message that made the sender feel noble and the recipient feel responsible. The kind that implied fracture, but not cause. The kind that placed the burden of repair gently but firmly in my lap. And that, I realized, was the pattern. Not just with Gregory, but with all of them. The selective memory, the emotionally coded expectations, the way they could reference family without ever examining how they treated it. He said family sticks together. But where was that togetherness when I sat alone on Christmas Eve? When they planned a yacht party and sent me a bill instead of an invitation, when I was silently funding their comfort, with no one ever asking if I was okay. Togetherness, in their world, was conditional, fragile, convenient. It was the kind that meant you bend, and will stay. I sat back, the glow of the screen soft against the dark kitchen. The apartment was quiet. The last of the holiday candles burned low. And for a moment, I thought about letting it go, deleting the email, moving on without a word. But silence was what they always counted on. So I clicked reply. No greeting, no explanation, just 4 words. So why didn't you? No signature, no closing line, just a mirror held up to the sentiment he'd sent. I hit send, and I didn't wait for a response, because I already knew. There wouldn't be one, not one with honesty. Anyway, not one that answered the question without spinning it into guilt. They had spent years calling me strong, resilient, the one who kept it all running. But strength, I've learned, is a dangerous label when it becomes the reason you're expected to carry everything alone. They hadn't lost the one who created the conflict. They lost the one who prevented it. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The next day, Logan texted. It was longer than usual. No emojis, no shorthand, no half jokes, just a block of words that read more like a reprimand than a conversation. You're tearing this family apart. What happened to you? You could have just talked to us. You didn't have to do all this. You owe us more than this. Madeline. I read it once. Then again. And then I closed the message without replying, because for all the words he had strung together, accusations, confusion, wounded pride, not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one paused to consider the silence I had sat in for years. Not one even touched the idea that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't done something to the family, but finally done something for myself. They still didn't understand. To them, my boundaries looked like betrayal. My stillness looked like spite. My absence, suddenly noticeable now that the subscriptions had stopped and the cards no longer swiped, looked like sabotage. But no one asked what had made me stop. No one asked what it had cost me to stay. Logan's message was a familiar song, guilt packaged as concern, an attempt to drag me back into the role I had outgrown, the fixer, the quiet one, the emotional janitor, sweeping up everyone else's mess with a soft smile and a steady hand. But I wasn't playing that part anymore. I didn't need to explain. My silence was the answer. For so long, I had been the unspoken glue, the one who remembered the birthdays, who kept the family calendar, who transferred money, caught mistakes, held it all up from behind the curtain without ever being seen. And the moment I stepped back, everything wobbled. Not because I broke it, but because they never realized how much of their stability was borrowed from me. Now, it was collapsing under its own weight. I muted Logan's thread, the same way I had muted the group chat. In the same way, I had muted the noise of expectations that were never spoken, but always implied. There was power in that quiet. Not loud, not cruel, just final. And for once, I wasn't rushing to soothe. I wasn't trying to soften the discomfort. I wasn't writing a message I hoped would make them understand. I was letting them sit in what they had created. Not out of punishment. But it was no longer my job to hold it all together. I didn't make an announcement. There was no dramatic goodbye, no message sent to the family group chat, no final call asking to be understood. I simply stepped away, quietly, intentionally, fully. I opened new bank accounts, this time with passwords only I knew, changed every login, updated every billing address, created a new email, one I never gave to anyone with the last name Carter, not out of spite, but to start something that belonged only to me. I called the phone company and started a new plan. My plan, one line, one number, no shared discounts, no hidden leeches writing quietly on my name, subscription by subscription, account by account. I took my life back, not to erase them, but to remove the version of myself they had grown too comfortable depending on, the one who always said yes, who always picked up, who always paid quietly and never asked to be noticed. That person is gone, not with a slammed door, not in anger, but with quiet finality, like a book being closed once the last sentence has been read. My apartment feels different now. Not bigger, not cleaner, just lighter. I light candles again. Make dinner with intention. Let the phone stay silent without wondering if I'm missing something. I'm not. This year, they unwrapped nothing from me. No cards, no gift baskets ordered last minute to keep the peace. No quietly absorbed costs. No behind the scenes rescues. What they got instead, without ceremony, without warning, was the realization that the daughter they had overlooked was the one who had been holding it all together. And now she's gone. Not lost. Not broken. Just no longer available. No longer the fixer. No longer the fallback. No longer the person they remembered. Only when something stopped working. For the first time in my life, I don't feel heavy. I feel free. And maybe, just maybe, that was the gift I was supposed to give myself all along. They thought I was strong because I never asked for anything, because I stayed quiet, paid the bills, smiled through the silence. But strength isn't silence, and disappearing doesn't mean defeat. It means I stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been remembered only when something needed fixing, leave a comment. Tell me your story. And if this one stayed with you, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the quietest exits often carry the loudest truth.